Recently, Starfield has once again been in the news. Why? Well, it's not what you might think. Director Emile Pagliarulo took his frustrations about the negative reactions to his game public on X. He wrote a very long thread where he basically said making games is hard and we should be happy we got anything at all. He started off by saying, "Funny how disconnected some players are from the realities of game development, and yet they speak with complete authority. I mean, I can guess what it takes to make a Hostess Twinkie, but I don't work in a factory, so what the hell do I really know? Not a lot." Funny how you missed the point, Emil. Gamers do not need to know the realities of game development in order to determine if a game is good or bad, or if a story is interesting or not. The point is that many of us who have played your game found it to be lacking in many ways and regretted the purchase. That's called buyer's remorse. The reason for that remorse is because we were sold on the idea that Starfield was going to be one of the best games of our time, and after the honeymoon was over, we realized that what we got was a dollar store knockoff of Mass Effect. He continued, "Part of me gets it. When you're a consumer and spend money on things, that gives you the right to complain about those things. I spend a lot of money on games every year, and sometimes it takes a lot for me not to scream into the internet's collective consciousness." Okay, so you get frustrated with other games. So what? We all do, and that is why we exercise our right to complain, because if no one says anything, then nothing will change, and we will continue to get crap from those companies. He continued on, "I don't complain about games on social for two reasons. One, I know how hard it is to make games and have too much respect for my fellow devs. Two, I work for a game studio and it would be uncool and unprofessional for me to do so. But sometimes I want to, oh boy." Okay, so really it's just one reason, because they both tie into each other. I understand that you are in the industry, so ranting about a game is not in your best interest to do so. However, most of us are not in the industry, so this point is moot. Second, not giving feedback that is relevant to the experience is tantamount to everyone just joining in one big circle jerk. What I mean by feedback is the criticism that has emerged after players got deep into the game and realized that it was not what was described to them from all of the marketing materials. He then said most people don't have constraints and are free to post whatever they want. The internet is a glorious wild, wild west, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And there was a time when I exercised that right very freely. Wait, so you want your cake and eat it too? You don't want people to complain because they don't know how hard it is, but you want them to express themselves freely. It's not often that a statement so perfectly contradicts your own words so perfectly, but somehow you did it. He continued, "When I was writing game reviews for the Adrenaline Vault forever ago, I was absolutely that person who would say whatever I wanted about a game, good or bad. Sometimes the good was overenthusiastically too good, and sometimes the bad was me being a sarcastic asshat." Wait a minute. When you were writing game reviews, that was a long time ago, and I get that things have changed a bit, but do you really expect me to believe that you just did so based on your opinion? Funny, that's exactly what most of us do. What one person finds to be fun, another may not. At the end of the day though, when nearly half of your audience is telling you that something is wrong, then something is wrong. You can't just chalk that up to people being asshats. Back when you reviewed games, the audience didn't really have a voice. Then, the only voice they had was their wallet, and by the time they realized something was crap, it was too late. Your analogy doesn't hold water because it's not the same today as it was back then. Times have changed, and we, the consumer, actually have a voice beyond our wallet. You say that game development is hard. Well, life is hard. Get a helmet. He then said, but through that time, I actually had no inkling what game development was actually like, how hard the designers, programmers, artists, producers, and everyone else worked. The struggle to bring a vision to life with constantly shifting resources. The stress. Well, boo fucking who. This is something I would expect to hear from someone who grew up getting participation trophies his entire life. Guess what? In games, as in life, there are winners and losers. I don't care how much work went into something. If you polish a turd, it's still a turd. We all understand that game development is hard. No one disputes that. However, we do expect to get a quality product. Making a car is hard work too. If you bought said car and it broke down a week after buying it, you'd be pretty pissed off. You certainly would not stop to think about how hard it was to make that car or care about how much work went into making it. Your entire argument is based on giving everyone hearty handshakes and saying good job regardless of whether it was deserved or not. In this case, it is not. He then continued, this isn't me complaining about my job. I've experienced all these things and will again. It's the nature of AAA game development. But I also have a great position and I'm still gainfully employed after 21 plus years. A blessing considering the thousands of layoffs this year. While I would never want somebody to lose their job, it happens and should happen when the person performing the job is not doing it very well. In a bit, I will point out the real problem that Bethesda has and the culprit behind that problem. For now, let's continue. Emil went on to say, I'm not trying to change anyone's mind because the internet, but given my position, I can't not share the truth. And the truth is, nobody sets out to make a bad game, and most game devs are incredibly talented, even if the game they release isn't up to par. Once again, this isn't a situation where everyone should get a participation trophy. No one is saying that any game developer sets out to make a bad game. The problem is that there is no accountability. If there was, then people would not continue to make the choices that they make and the games would not suffer as much. He continued, see, I never knew this before, but if nothing else, video game development is a series of concessions and tough decisions. There's that perfect game that you want to make, and then there's the game that you can make. Sometimes, if the gods smile on you, those two are very close. Okay, so you're saying that you did the best you could with the choices that were given. Nearly 8 years in the making, and this was the best you had? Come on! You can't honestly expect anyone to believe that load of crap. I could believe it if you only had a few years, like say 3 or 4, but you had 8 years, man. He went on to say, but in order to get there, in order to get as close as possible to the vision, the team had to push itself harder and harder, often while dealing with devs being shuffled around or leaving, looming deadlines, and creative decisions you wish you didn't have to make. This statement is absurd. Now it sounds like you are trying to lay blame on others like maybe Todd Howard. Though, to be honest and fair, he probably did have a hand in making some of the poor decisions. No, sir. Beyond maybe a few things, it was you who made the poor choices, and you who must own up to them. He then continued, and team is absolutely the operative word there. Lots and lots of folks doing lots of work. Writing, level building, making character models, coding game systems, trying to schedule it all so it can get done and the folks don't burn out, and on and on. You know, it almost sounds like a pity party here. Oh, poor me. I have a great job, but I suck at it and you don't like me. My God, man, grow up. We all know that making a game is hard work. Again, that does not matter. That is your job. It is also your job to put out a quality product that we consumers will want to buy. Going on a Twitter or X rant is not going to help your position. He then said, "So sure, you can dislike parts of the game. You can hate on the game entirely. But don't fool yourself into thinking that you know why it is the way it is, unless it's somehow documented and verified, or how it got to be that way, good or bad." Oh, don't you worry, Emil. I will be getting to the reason why, which just so happens to be documented. Hell, it will be your own words. We will get to that in just a minute. As for the rest of the statement, we can all guess as to why things turned out the way they did. At the end of the day, Starfield was the laziest game design I have ever seen from Bethesda, and that is saying something. He then said, "Chances are, unless you've made a game yourself, you don't know who made certain decisions, who did specific work, how many people were actually available to do that work, any time challenges faced, or how often you had to overcome technology itself. This one is huge." You know what? I will grant you that. However, we don't need to know any of that because you, sir, were the game director, which means that ultimately you made most of the decisions, unless you're trying to put the blame on Todd Howard now that the backlash has been made apparent. Either way, you were the one in charge of this game, and it suffered and continues to suffer because of you and your choices. Some of those choices span most of your career, and it shows in the games that have come out during that time. More on that in a moment. Then he said, "So yes, love games, buy them, play them, and complain to your heart's content. It's sort of the nature of the developer-player transactional relationship." I just love how condescending that was, and it really just shows how small-minded he really is. Consumers are more than just transactions. We are the very lifeblood that keeps you, as you said earlier, gainfully employed. Basically, you want to complain about people that complain about your game, but they can only do so as long as they buy it and play it. Pathetic. Finally, he said, "But just know that the game that you were playing is in some ways a freaking miracle in and of itself. Normal people have come together to work for years for one goal, to bring you fun and happiness. So it helps to remember that and them." This entire rant was absolutely pointless. You contradict yourself multiple times, then finish off by telling everyone to remember the people that worked hard to give us this steaming pile of shit, that we the consumer should be happy to have it because it was a miracle that it even exists. You know, for a game that costs $70+, we don't need to remember the people who made it. We just need to get a quality game that we paid for. We did not get that. Instead, we got a game that should have been priced closer to the $20 mark at launch because the quality would at least match the price point better. The comment section of this rant was rightfully lit up by people who, like me, are fed up with lazy, soulless games that come from the current Bethesda game studios. Starfield forced me to step back and take a long, hard look at every game they put out over the years. I have been playing Bethesda games since Daggerfall. Morrowind was the last great game that Bethesda put out. From that point on, the quality slowly declined. Oblivion was a good game. Fallout 3 was a good game. Skyrim was good, but it was made better by modders. Fallout 4 was good, but again, it was made better by modders. 76 was a disaster at launch, but is now somewhat good. Starfield has good parts, but overall it is not a good game. Emo also went on to claim that people were misrepresenting a speech that he made at a conference where he talked about how games are made at Bethesda. Well, Emo, I watched the entire speech. I heard a lot of word salad, but not a lot of good ideas. I am not going to make you, the viewer, go through the entire speech, but I will go over the main points and give my thoughts each step of the way.
So what's the story with Bethesda stories? How do we make our stories, and how do I personally make my stories? I thought, it's funny, I had never really thought of the process that I use to write stories and make games, and then I realized I do have a process. And I started to put it together. I realized that there are 3 primary points that I use when I create a story for one of our games. So I thought I'd run through those 3 points for everyone here today. The first is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. This is my own personal rule for myself, right? And I'll go through each of these individually. The next, write what you know. One of the oldest tricks for writing, right? Write what you know, it's true. And 3, this is a big one. Great games are played, not made. This is one of Bethesda's studio mottos, but this is a personal motto for me as well. So, going to the first point, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. What does that mean? Well, for me, that means when I'm coming up with a story for a game, I like to concentrate on strong central themes. And 1 or 2 strong central themes is enough. I find that think of a good movie or think of a good game, and you can usually think of a good movie or a good game with a good story, and you can usually realize that there's a strong central theme, a strong undercurrent, right? See a bad movie, play a bad game with a bad story, and it's usually, sometimes it's a mess. I saw a movie recently, which I will not name, that was kind of a mess. And the story was all over the place, and it really didn't know what it wanted to be.
So point 1 is keep it simple, stupid, or KISS. This works for some things, but not really for a lot of other things. I don't mind keeping certain things simple, but in an open world RPG, you kind of need to have complex arching stories. For all of my hate of Fallout New Vegas, the one thing that it does very well is complex storytelling. At every point in the game, you have choice and consequence. Literally every choice you make will have some sort of impact at the end of the game. Yes, there are times when keeping it simple is a good idea, but it should not be part of the core of the game design structure. This is in part why many of Bethesda's games just seem to be too easy.
Now going to the second point, write what you know. What does this mean, write what you know? Does this mean that if you are working as a dishwasher and decide to become a game developer, you need to make a game about washing dishes? No. Though that would be a fun game. An HTC Live game with a headset washing dishes would be really cool. No, it means that you, actually, I'll show you this. This person right there, right? You probably don't recognize him. His face is not very memorable, right? Does anybody know who he is? Yes, Hayao Miyazaki, right? Creator of some of the best stories that we've seen in anime, right? And he got into a little bit of hot water recently. He made some comments online that circulated online that had become memes and everything. And he had said that the state of anime currently was going downhill. And people, attributed it to, oh my God, Miyazaki doesn't like anime anymore. And no, they completely missed the point. What he said was, the people who are creating anime now have stopped observing other people. They have stopped observing life. So in order to write what you know have to know something. You have to live. You have to observe people, and so write what you know, for me, means that you draw upon your personal experiences. So for me, one of my my first big break at Bethesda was around 2006, when we started working on Oblivion. I was tasked with creating the Dark Brotherhood, which is the Assassin's Guild. And I wanted to sort of leverage the experience I had at Looking Glass Studios working on the Thief games. And Thief is about sneaking around and stealing stuff. I wanted to sneak around and stab people in the face. I thought that would be fun. But what do I know? Write what you know. What do I know about being a medieval or fantasy assassin? Not a lot, right? There are certainly people I would like to kill, but I have not yet had the experience. So what do I know? So what I did at this point in Bethesda, the fiction was sort of malleable. Like the Elder Scrolls had a long history, but everything was sort of all over the place. So the designers at that point were given sort of carte blanche to create our own stories and do what we wanted. So I thought to myself, how could I relate this, an evil assassins guild, to my own personal experiences? It's like, I don't know what this is, but I do know. I know the Catholic Church. I grew up Catholic. And so, actually, the Dark Brotherhood in Oblivion, the story is actually an evil take on the Catholic Church. There is, it's true, Sithis, the Dread Father, is actually an evil take on God. The Night Mother is an evil version of Mary. I know I'm going to hell when this is over, so it's fine. So I drew upon those experiences. And so when we came to Fallout 4, the game is set in Boston, okay? I grew up in Boston. For me it was easy, right? I knew that I could use my own experiences and leverage that in telling the story. So, and these are literally places I grew up. Fenway Park became Diamond City. The Hatch Shell, where they have concerts, became, I think there's a crazy cult in the game. The Swan Boats, where I grew up going to the Swan Boats. That's in the game. I won't tell you what's there, spoilers. But I had been to all these locations. And this place right here, this is Joe's Sandwich Shop, a location that I was very familiar with. That is also in the game. And that is where I grew up. Humboldt Place, that's the street I grew up. And of course, I had to put my bedroom in the game. Right? So I was able to leverage my own personal experiences, obviously, write what you know, I know Boston. But, let's say I didn't grow up in Boston. In fact, the game was not set there originally. I still have a design document in my desk, early on in pre-production, that the game is set in an entirely different location. It's a location that we decided to change, and I was not the one to decide to set the game in Boston, by the way. Very happy we did for obvious reasons. But let's say the game wasn't set there. Could I still write what I know? Could I still write the story of Fallout 4? Fallout 4, at its heart, is the story of two men. Young Emil Padme Rouleau, there with his Mickey Mouse pancakes, and Johnny Depp. All right, not exactly. Not really Johnny Depp. Actually, if you've seen the movie Black Mass, Johnny Depp portrayed a man named James Whitey Bulger. Okay? There's the real man right there. Pretty good flexibility. When I was growing up in Boston, James Whitey Bulger was the head of the Irish Mafia, crime boss. And the thing is, that picture right there, I had seen that picture for the first time maybe 10 years ago. Nobody knew what he looked like. He was a mystery. Even as a kid, you just knew. He owned a tavern. And the story is, even when I was 8, 9 years old, if you went into that tavern, you wouldn't come out. So, when I was a kid, James Whitey Bulger was the monster in the closet. He was the mysterious, unknown evil that was out there. Okay? You didn't know where. No one knew where he was or how to get to him, but you knew he was out there. You knew he was controlling things. And so, I leveraged that experience I had growing up, and that thing with Whitey Bulger, and to translate that into Fallout 4. So, in Fallout 4, the main fictional story beat is about an organization that is the monster in the closet. That is the shadow. You hear about but you don't see, and that is the Institute.
Point 2 is write what you know. Well, clearly that is a problem for you, Emil, since you don't seem to know much. You tried to say that you came up with the Institute based on the real-life criminal Whitey Bulger. The problem is that is not at all what came to mind for me. Even with the knowledge of who he was and what he did, I still don't see the comparison. Here's the thing. You don't actually need to know something in order to write about it, as long as you do a proper amount of research to be able to write about whatever it is you're going to write. For example, if you're going to write about the horrors of war, and you have never been in it or experienced war, then you don't know anything about it. So the next step would be to do some research, or even just interview some war veterans. This will provide you with the information you need to be able to write about that. Ironically, this is how really good games were written back in the day. So your second point is once again not really important. There are more ways to be able to write a compelling story than drawing upon personal experience.
And my third point is, and my third point and the longest point, and all of these sort of tie together, but great games are played and not made. So this is a point for the studio. This is one of our mottos at the studio, but it has several meanings. On a studio-wide level, great games are played, not made, means that we use the iterative process. We make the game, we are very flexible with changing things. We are actually at a state now in the development of the studio, we don't have a lot of extensive design documentation. We found that probably after we hit Fallout 3, the design docs that we had became outdated very quickly because we knew we needed to get stuff in the game and play it and then change it. We needed to iterate on it. So we would have these extensive 50-page design documents that were completely outdated, and the time it took to maintain those just wasn't worth it. And so great games are played, not made means that as a studio, we are constantly iterating. But also on a personal level, on a designer level, when I work with my designers, with the designers at the studio, great games are played, not made means that we have very, very good extensive tools for creating content at Bethesda. In fact, we release those tools publicly. Anyone here can download them and make stuff with it. So it's very easy to use those tools and to create content. But it's incumbent upon every designer and everyone at the studio that makes the content to go into the game and play it and see if it's any good. And so on a personal level, on a designer level, that's what it means. Great games are played, not made. It means play your own stuff. And it sounds, actually, it's funny because that sounds very common sense, like a no-brainer, right? But it's actually very difficult to get people to play their own stuff. It's difficult for me to play my own stuff because there's a frightening realization that you have great ideas. Things look great on paper. Then you put it in the game. Especially when it's your own stuff. Everything's brilliant. Everything you do is brilliant. It's going to be great. You write your design documents, and then you play it in the game, and wow, it sucks, right? Every game developer has gone through that. And so you have to, there's a moment of fear where you have to really come to grips with the fact that maybe the content you've created isn't that good.
And now we get to the heart of the problem at Bethesda. This final point, great games are played, not made, is the biggest crock of shit I've ever heard. Great games are made because they get played. That is what this should say. One of the biggest problems at Bethesda is the fact that they don't use design documents. I can now see why Bethesda games take so long to make. No one knows what is going on or where to fit things in or even how to make something seem seamless because they don't have proper documentation to help guide them through the development process. Emil has been failing upwards his entire career at Bethesda. What I mean by this is that he continues to fail and still get promoted. It reminds me of the movie Office Space, but happening in real life. The entire point of design documents is to help developers stay on track. It lays out the entire game and helps to keep things organized so that a cohesive story can be told without things feeling discombobulated. Finding out that after Fallout 3, this became the norm for Bethesda makes sense because every game after that felt like it was all over the place and things just didn't fit right. Sometimes I would feel like the story was clicking right along, and then all of a sudden something would happen and it just didn't feel right. Like the story just took a left turn out of the blue. This happened in Skyrim, Fallout 4, Fallout 76, and even Starfield, though in Starfield this happens multiple times. Now, I can forgive 76 a bit because it is an online multiplayer game, so that does come with its own set of challenges. I can't say the same for the rest. Starfield is just the latest game, and it, by far, seems to be the worst of the bunch. This makes me very uneasy about future titles. Emil did say one thing that was correct though. When he said it was hard for him to play his own games, and then went on a small rant about how on paper everything sounds good, and then you play it and it really sucks, well, that describes just about everything you have written to date. He also said something that was just so stupid that I had to stop, get up from my desk, and walk away because otherwise I was going to put my fist through my monitor. Here's what he said.
Because every game developer is a storyteller in an interactive medium. You are not writing a screenplay. You are not writing a novel. You are writing a piece of fiction that has an important interactive component. And so this is some of the team members. These are some of the quest designers at Bethesda Game Studios. They are not the only designers. In fact, a lot of the quests are also made by our level designers, our character artists, our world artists. They're a handsome bunch, I know. And of course, this is Corey. She's our first female quest designer. She's awesome. She's also notoriously camera shy, so I threatened to draw her in MS Paint if you didn't get her picture taken. So I did just that. But they're great, and I work with this team to create our stories. And but like I said, our stories are played, not made. And so this slide, I know, is coming out of nowhere. What does this possibly have to do with anything, right? Like, this is Han and Chewie from Star Wars. Everything goes back to Star Wars, right? That should be a slide on its own, right? I love the scene in Star Wars. What's happening here in Star Wars? This is Han Solo's been frozen, and he comes out and he says, I've been out for a little while, and everyone's having delusions of grandeur, right? That's what this slide is about, delusions of grandeur. So when we start writing a story at Bethesda, when I start working with the team, we start big. Like, we always want to do this. So we always want to write the great American novel, right? Fallout 3 will be this big epic thing. You're looking for your father. We'll get Liam Neeson to voice the role of the father. And, so we always want to tell a huge story. And like the great American novel, we want to be, let's be the Great Gatsby. And, let's be Moby Dick, or let's be the Scarlet Letter. And there's an inherent problem with that, right? These are all amazing works of fiction. But they're all non-interactive, right? So when you're writing a story for a video game, you always have to keep the player in mind, right? And so what happens we're writing our great American novel. This is the process. This is what happens at Bethesda when you write the main story of a game, and even some of the smaller stories. So let's say, okay, we're going to write the great American novel. It's going to be this thing. And on every page will be written comedy and tragedy, and it'll be wonderful. It'll be amazing. And you're going to give this book, this great American novel, to the player. And what are they going to do with it? They're going to rip out every page and make paper airplanes out of them. And they're going to throw them around the room. And they're never going to see your story. Because the story is there, right? But they are going to spend 30 hours making shacks, okay? They're going to spend 20 hours looking for bobbleheads, okay? But that's okay. We know that going in. That's the jagged pill that we swallow when we do this.
So basically, he doesn't want to write anything that is good because he thinks that the players are just going to ignore it anyway, so why bother? What a fucking moron. And this is the guy who is lead writer? Director? For fuck's sake, fire this guy. I can't even begin to express my rage about this philosophy. Then he has the nerve to go on and say that he is making games for the players. Like hell you are. You are just taking the path of least resistance and trying to make a game with as little as effort as possible. Now, is it possible that Todd Howard is leading the charge on this philosophy? Sure. It is also possible that pigs will fly out of my ass. However, I don't see this being the case. Todd is a very busy and distracted man. He is far too busy to really have any major impact on any of the games that are being made anymore. The reality is that Emil is the problem, and it is his direction that is leading Bethesda down a path to ruin. Now, I know that many of the most talented people at Bethesda have left, and they have not really spoken about why they left, and I don't expect them to do so. I will, however, make an educated guess as to why. I think they got tired of the constant meetings, lack of documentation, and overall lack of care that has now taken hold of the company. Will Shen was one of the few people on the staff that was trying very hard to bring back the glory of the past, and I think he left because he got tired of that constant uphill battle. I may be wrong, but I somehow doubt that I am. During the speech, Emil talked about how during the development of Fallout 4, they found that they would just skip through the dialogue while playtesting the game. He thought this meant that people would just want to be able to control the amount of time spent talking to NPCs. I would argue that the real reason is that the story was not interesting. You see, this is a problem. When you have developers ignoring the reality of the situation, it creates a game that, when released, will suffer from a multitude of problems. This is why modders come in to save the day for these games, because they see a problem, recognize that it doesn't work, and come up with a solution to fix it. In some instances, they will completely overhaul the entire game because the original was hot garbage. This leads us to the other major problem that Bethesda has. They don't understand their audience. They don't understand why players play their games. They think that they do, but the things that they think we love and want more of are not even close to being correct. Yes, we love big open worlds that we can explore. However, there is more to it than just that. The exploration has to be interesting, have purpose, and be rewarding. The last game to do this well was Skyrim. In Skyrim, you can just go out and explore, and you will inevitably find a handcrafted location that will have lore that lets you know why this location exists and even the history behind it, and you will usually be rewarded for that exploration with something unique, be that a weapon, armor, or some other piece of treasure. However, in Fallout 4, Bethesda decided to rely on the procedural generation to create a random legendary item that may or may not be any good as your reward. Sure, we still had the lore, so at least it was not all for nothing, but it didn't stop there. We also got the procedural endless quests, like the ones we get from Preston Garvey. This is yet another departure from the traditional Bethesda content that we all came to love, that being going out and questing, knowing that there was going to be a satisfying end. Again, Skyrim was the last Bethesda game to do this. Then we got 76. Again, we saw the thing we loved about Bethesda games get stripped away even more. More procedural generation took hold, and the rewards for exploring were even less than what we had in Fallout 4. I could go on and on about 76, but we all know about that at this point. Now we have Starfield. While visually it is very interesting, the content got even worse. The procedural generation has reached a point of just being lazy. We got very few unique rewards, and those are mediocre at best. The procedurally generated locations have little to no lore. What we do get for lore often feels incomplete and does not even come close to painting a picture or explaining why the location even exists. Sometimes the lore does not even match up with the environment. I once found a farm that was telling a story about plants that have been growing in low gravity, even though the world I was on had high gravity. That was just one example of why I have so many problems with this game. There was no reason for that to happen other than the fact that the game was lazily designed. Top that off with the fact that some of the more prominent modders have already stated that they will not be creating mods for Starfield, and you begin to see the problem. If the goal was to make Starfield a modder's paradise, then it is already failing, as they just don't want to do it. Modding became popular with Skyrim because the world space was already very interesting with deep lore. The Fallout 4 modding scene took off for similar reasons. 76 would have had modders had they been given the opportunity. Starfield, on the other hand, is severely lacking in lore, and most of the world space is empty or being utilized with the lazy procedural generation. No matter how you slice it, the problem with Starfield is Emil and his design philosophy. This has clearly bled into the rest of the company based on the steady decline of quality since Fallout 3. To make matters worse, many of the older developers who have been around since Morrowind and Oblivion have left the studio. This leaves the company getting new, younger developers who are being trained to follow the current development process. This brings us full circle to the problem at hand. As much as I hate to say it, unless this problem is dealt with, and soon, it will only get worse. Games will take much longer to develop, and those games will suffer the same way every game has since Skyrim. I worry for the future of Bethesda and the Elder Scrolls and Fallout franchises. If nothing changes, those future games will not be worth playing, and that is just sad. I can only hope that Bethesda will listen to the criticism and make the changes needed in order to get back to being the great company that they once were. To Emil, I hope you watch this and take the things I said to heart. Not because I want you to continue to fail, rather to learn something and hopefully get better. I believe anyone can change as long as the effort is put in to do so. It won't be easy, but if I can help, I would be happy to do so. The only goal I have is to get our favorite games back to being great. Get them back to the Game of the Year status that they once held so proudly. Bethesda has lost its way, and like a lost child, just needs a little help to find itself again. I know this video went a bit darker than my usual videos do, but I'm just so very frustrated with the way things are going, and I don't want to see our favorite games suffer anymore. Do you agree with me? Did I miss anything that should have been addressed? Do you feel different? And if so, why? Sound off in the comments below. While you're at it, like, subscribe, and share this far and wide because I really do want Bethesda to see it and take it to heart. And as always, I'm just glad you stopped by. And I'll see you in the next one.